In this video, you will learn how to make a name tag that teaches you how to make a rough cut of a slab, how to compress a slab, and how to carve your name and class code correctly into a project. We'll also be using these later to do some practice glazing and to learn a little bit about glazing. So for this assignment, if you're in class, your teacher is going to give you a template that is 3.5 inches by 1.25 inch, and it is a rectangle. If you happen to be doing this assignment at home, then you'll need to make your own template. So you'll get out your ruler and measure and try to make it as rectangular as possible. In-class people will also be given a slab of clay. That's just kind of just a small little piece of clay. So I just have some scrap here that I want to use to show you some things. If you're at home, then you'll want to watch the video, one of the other videos on how to roll a slab at home, and you'll want to roll out your slab before you begin this process. Okay, so I just have a small enough piece of clay that my name tag is going to fit on it. It's been rolled out to approximately a 1/4 inch thick. So if we look at the side here, and I have a ruler handy so we can see that it's somewhere in between a 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. Oops, sorry. Okay, so hopefully you can see here where we are on the ruler. Okay, so about a 1/4 inch thick. You do want to make sure if you're rolling your slab at home that your slab is the same thickness throughout. Now, the first thing that we'll do when we get our slab is we're going to rough cut. We're going to make what's called a rough cut. So right now I have more than enough clay than I need for my template. So I want to cut away some of that extra clay. So I'm going to find a spot on my slab where my name tag will fit well and where I can have some extra space going around my template. For this, I'm going to use my fettling knife to do what's called a rough cut. And for a rough cut, we're going to leave somewhere between 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch space on the outside of the template. So we're not cutting right up to the template. We want to leave a little bit of space. So let me cut it so you can see. And I like to trim away any, especially if there's like crumbly edges to the slab. I like to try to get rid of those when I'm making my rough cut. We want to try to stay away from those crumbly edges. They're not going to be as strong as the clay that's in the center. All right, so hopefully you can see here that my template has been rough cut. Now, anytime we're working with slabs and templates like this, we always want to start with a rough cut, okay? Now, I'm going to remove my template for a few minutes so that I can take care of my slab. So right now, my slab has gone through the slab roller, and as it's been rolled and stretched through the slab roller, some texture has imprinted into the clay from the canvas that it was sitting on. So I'm going to take a few minutes. I want to compress my slab. Compressing clay, when we compress our clay, especially our slabs, we're going to want to use a rubber kidney or something similar that we may have found at home to use. And I like to use the rounded part of the rubber kidney, and the side that has like the writing on it, it has a curve to it, and I like that side to be face down onto my slab. As I'm compressing, I'm going to kind of pull my hand back and forth over the slab, smoothing out the texture. This is also realigning the clay particles. I'm going to be compressing my slab from multiple directions. This is really one of the most important things that you can do when working with slabs, is making sure that your clay is really well compressed. If we skip this step, there's a greater chance that your slab will warp as it's drying out. Another nice thing about compressing the clay, if there happen to be any pockets of air that are trapped in the clay, this will help bring those to the surface where we could pop them with a pin tool. and then recompress. I always want to make sure that I compress both sides of my slab, so I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to compress the other side as well. Okay, so at this point, my slab here is still really plastic, and I can tell because it's gonna wanna droop and bend as I hold it up. Okay, so if it's droopy at all, that's not what we want. So we want to get this to a better temperature in order to cut to the template. So again, right now, my slab, my little piece of slab is bigger than my template. So in order to get it, what we want to do is we want to get it to the next stage of clay. So we're at plastic now, so we want to move on to soft leather hard. So in order to get this slab to soft leather hard, I'm going to take a piece of dry paper towel and I'm going to wrap my slab in the dry paper towel. And this dry paper towel is going to help to absorb some of the water out of the clay. And then I'm going to put this in a bag. Okay, so let me go grab my bag. All right, so once this is wrapped in dry paper towel, if I were to leave this out of the bag, this is going to dry out to bone dry and I won't be able to do anything with it. So it's really important. We're learning here how to monitor the temperature of the clay as well. So I'm going to put this in a bag. Okay, so my clay is in the bag. I'm going to take my bag and I'm going to wrap the bag kind of around my slab so that it is sealed in the bag. And I want to try to keep my slab laying flat. So I might just take that open end of the bag, that extra end of the bag, and lay my slab or lay that on top of the slab, or kind of figure out a way to wrap it around your project or your little tile here so that the bag is sealed and it won't dry out. I'm then going to put my bag in my storage area. So for you guys in class, it'll be in your cabinet. At home, you'll find a place where it won't get messed with. And we'll let this sit until the next class. So I'm going to put mine off to dry for a little bit. I do have another one that I made. So I'm going to pause here and get set up with my other slab that is at soft leather hard. So here's my other slab that I've had sitting sealed in a plastic bag. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up. So this would probably happen for you on the next class period after you've made your rough cut and compressed your slab. So here I have my little rough cut slab. I can tell that the paper towel is feeling a little bit damp, and that is because some of the moisture from the clay is starting to evaporate out of the clay into the paper towel. So I do want to get rid of this paper towel. And if it wasn't dry enough yet, I could wrap it in new paper towel, but it should be to a good point right now. So let me get rid of my paper towel. Okay, so I can tell a couple other ways that I can tell that this is at the soft leather hard stage. It's still flexible, so I can still kind of wiggle it a little bit. If I were to hold up a corner of this, it's going to stand up by itself. Okay, so we can see off to the side. It's going to hold its form. If this were still plastic, that would want to flop back down. But the clay is still bendy enough that I can manipulate it if I needed to. So at this stage, this is the stage where we will do a cut to template. So I have my template, and my template back out. And as you can see, this one was rough cut as well. Whenever we cut to template, if we're working with something straight, it's a good idea to use a fettling knife. If we were cutting something that was round, a pin tool or needle tool would work better. So I'm going to work with my fettling knife. And when I'm cutting to my template, I want to make sure that I keep my cutting tool straight up and down. So let me see if I can find a better angle for you to see this. All right, so as I'm cutting, I want to hold my template, and I like to keep my fettling knife perpendicular to the table. So I want to make sure that it's not at an angle at all. If it's at an angle, then I'm going to cut into my slab at an angle, which isn't going to give me nice 90-degree corners. I also like to hold my fettling knife down here a little bit to help me control it better. And I'm looking at it from above, and I'm just going to carefully glide my fettling knife along the edge of the template, and then I like to catch the bottom part with my thumb so I don't distort my slab. Now I'm right-handed, so I like to always cut on my right side. If you're left-handed, maybe you want to cut on your left side. So I may flip this at some point. I think I can go ahead and cut the top. Okay, so whenever you're instructed to cut something to template, that would mean that you're cutting it to be the exact same size as the template. Whenever we do a rough cut, remember we leave a little bit of space on the outside. So at this point, I'm done with my templates. I'm going to remove this so that you can see that my slab has been cut to the same size and shape as my template. Now, a couple things to know. Right now, my clay is still at the soft leather hard stage, so it's still pretty soft. I can still manipulate it. When I've made my cut, I created some corners here. So let me turn this on the side so you can see. And these corners, okay, where I've cut, especially like here and here, those can become sharp later. So a good thing to learn right now is how to finish your edges. So every time you cut something, you're always going to want to finish that edge. We never want to have any unfinished edges. So to finish an edge, we want to soften and round it. So I'm going to just use my finger here to finish this edge. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of start off by gently pressing that corner, that sharp corner that was created from my cut. I'm just going to press it down a little bit. I'm going to kind of press down my corners of my rectangle also because I don't want those to be sharp later. I'll do this on all four sides to start with. Again, I'm just doing this gently. I don't want to distort, I don't want to change the shape of my slab too much. I just want to soften that edge a little bit. All right, so that looks better. I also just want to run my finger just a little bit back and forth just to make sure that it's not lumpy from when I press my fingers in. Give it a little bit more of a smooth surface. Okay, so the top side is done. If I turn this to the side, hopefully you can see that the top part has been curved. Okay, so you can maybe see on the corner especially how that's curving down. The bottom is still flat though. So I want to always make sure that I am finishing both sides of a slab especially. So I'm going to turn this over. So I've already done this side. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do the exact same thing to the back side. Okay, so at this point, when I hold this up, you should be able to see that both edges have been rounded. I always like to then just go along these sides now, hold this in my hand and make sure that the sides look just as good as the top and bottom. All right, so at this point, my clay is still at that soft leather hard stage. And the next step for the assignment is going to be to learn how to carve our name and class code into this slab of clay. But the clay is not quite ready for carving. So soft leather hard stage is good for doing some smoothing and blending. It would be the perfect stage if we wanted to add something onto this. But for carving, we want our clay to dry out to the next stage of clay, which is dry leather hard. So in order to get my clay to dry leather hard, I'm going to wrap this again with dry paper towel. I'm going to seal this in my bag, and I'm going to let it sit for another class period. And then when I come back, we'll kind of check it the next class period, and if it's ready to be carved, you'll be able to carve it. So I'm gonna let mine sit for a little while to become dry leather hard, and then I'll come back to show you how to carve your name and class code into clay. Okay, so my name tag has been drying out for a while. I had it wrapped in dry paper towel in a plastic bag, and it is now stiffened up to dry leather hard. And I can tell that because it's no longer flexible, like from the side view. If I were gonna try to bend this, it would break in half. Okay, so it's much more stiff. It no longer feels wet to the touch. So there's also a whitish surface that's starting to form on the clay, like a chalky surface. And that those are just some clues that lead me to know that this clay is at dry leather hard. Now I also have a piece of clay here that's at soft leather hard, and I wanted to show you the difference between carving on soft leather hard and carving on dry leather hard, so that you can see why it's so important to make sure your clay is at the right temperature for this. So when we're carving, we want to use, well, we use a variety of tools, but when we're carving our name, we're going to be using our wooden scribe tool. And if you were working at home, in place of this tool, you could use a dull pencil would work also. So I'm using this pointed side. I never, ever, ever want to use a pin tool to carve my name. So here's the pin tool. This pin tool is really sharp. Okay, it's got a very sharp point to it, and it's going to cut too deep in the clay. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. The wooden scribe tool has more of a rounded point to it. And if your point's too sharp, we have sandpaper in the classroom that we can sand this down to give it more of a rounded edge is what we're looking for to help us to carve. So let's start by carving into the soft leather hard clay first, just so you can see why we don't want to do it this way. So if I were going to write my name into soft leather hard clay, or plastic clay, I suppose, for that matter, you're going to see that it looks really messy. Let me hold it up. As I was carving, these little areas are raising up. We call those burrs, and those burrs later on are going to be really sharp. So if you look at it from the side view, you can see how they're sticking up. And if this was on the bottom of our project like that, and we left it, that would probably scratch up a table or a surface that we're working on. Also, it's going to be harder to read your name when the clay is at soft leather hard. So this is a no. If the clay is starting to pull up like that, when you try to carve your name into it, just let it sit out a little bit longer. It's just not ready yet. So we could, if I wanted to get this ready to be carved, I'd just wrap it in dry paper towel and put it in my bag for another class period until it's at the dry leather hard stage. All right, so in contrast, here I have my dry leather hard piece of clay, and when I carve into this, first of all, it's not going to be as easy to press down into the clay, so I'm going to have to go over my name probably a couple of different times. Now, something important to know that whenever you're carving your name into a project, there are a couple ways that would be okay to do it. But if you don't carve your name correctly into your project, it'll be really hard for your teacher to know whose is whose and to help keep track of everything. So the two options would be your first name with a last initial and then your class code, or your first initial, last name with your class code. Please, no just initials, because you may have the same initials as someone else. So I'm going to go ahead and do my first initial, which is an L. and then my last name. And I'm starting off just kind of nice and slow. I don't want to carve too deep the first time. What I like to do is I like to do a little bit at a time, and that's going to help so that I don't have a lot of burrs in my clay. So I have my name, and then let's just say my class code happens to be 1C. And again, your class code will be your teacher's initial and the class period that you have your teacher. So if I put 1C, that would mean I have Cowan for first period. I also could have put that as C1, and your teacher would know what you meant. Now, let me hold this up a little bit so you can see. I just did a little bit of a carve. Right now, it's still kind of hard to see my name, and I still have some burrs. Now, your stiff blending brush is going to be able to help with this. So I have a dry, stiff blending brush here that I'm going to use to just kind of carefully brush away any burrs from when I carved my name. Okay, now, so I'm getting rid of all my burrs. So hopefully, I know it's kind of hard to see in this video, but my name is there, but it's not deep enough and it's not wide enough. So it's important to be able to carve deep enough your name and to make your letters a little bit more wide than just a real thin line. Occasionally glaze might fill into your name, and if you haven't carved deep enough or wide enough, the glaze will completely wipe away your name. So taking time to do this correctly will be helpful. So I'm going to just go ahead and go over my name and class code a few more times. I'm just going to gradually go deeper. I'll probably go over it at least 2 more times, and I'm going to try to prevent burrs as much as possible. But when carving, be careful though that you don't go too deep also. And I'll use my stiff blending brush again to brush away those burrs. You can also use the other side of your wooden scribe tool to help you if like you can't get those pieces to smooth down, you can kind of scrape at them with this edge of the tool as well. So I'm noticing my name's starting to show up a little bit more, but it's still not deep enough. So I'm gonna go over it at least 1 more time. So as you can see, maybe this third time I go over it, I'm just going back and forth over my lines a couple more times just to make sure that I'm going deep enough. I wouldn't want to do this on my first pass over my name, but maybe on the third pass, it's okay to go a little bit deeper back and forth with your scribe tool. So let me hold this up a little bit. So hopefully you can see here that I have my name and class code carved into my name tag. At this point, I would want to turn this in so that it can be graded and so that it can allow to become bone dry and be fired. And then we'll be using these name tags also throughout the semester, maybe with our projects. Or, and also we're gonna learn how to glaze, to do some glazing with these as well. So make sure you hang on to them. You will be turning these in for a grade. One other thing though, before I stop, I did want to show you why you don't want to use the pin tool to carve your name. So let me just do that really quickly. I'm just gonna flip this over and do this on the back. And if I were to use my needle tool to carve my name, it's going to carve a really thin line and it's going to cut really deep into the clay. Okay. And no matter how many times you go over it, you're really just going to go deeper and deeper with that really thin line, and you're creating sharp edges here and more burrs. Okay. So let me hold it up so you can see how sharp and thin that line is. And even going over it with a stiff blending brush isn't going to make it any wider. So please don't use the pin tool to carve your name. All right, so that's it. Thank you guys.